Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the DLF Commissioner Chronicles. Joining me for a second week in a row, it is Scott Fish. I didn't say this last week, I forgot, but you got to like the video and subscribe to the DLF YouTube channel. If you didn't do it last week because you forgot. You forgot because I didn't tell you. You forgot, but you remember this week, so that made up for it. And so today, DLF Commissioner Chronicles, we are talking about Dynasty in-season commissioning. Now, we're going to start when we're going to do a very broad scope of things today, and I'm sure that I'm going to be covering a couple of these topics in detail on future episodes, but I figured with the season about to start, we should get the expert on, Scott Fish, to talk about some in-season commissioning. How's it going tonight, Scott?
Going well. Looking forward to talking about this. Talking about redraft was fun. It's kind of out of people's wheelhouse. I'm gonna imagine on the Dynasty League football channel, but I'm sure they all have some redraft leagues somewhere. But it's good to get back to talking some Dynasty.
Alrighty, so with Dynasty, the first thing you have to talk about when you're talking about in-season Dynasty Fantasy Football is activity. Yeah. Now, as the commissioner, and I feel like it's becoming more and more popular that commissioners, like very few Dynasty commissioners commission one league. Like right. There's Dynasty commissioners that commission 4 leagues and 7 leagues, and then there's guys who commission 572 leagues, like you.
Yeah.
So what are some of the basics for tracking league activity? What do you do? What do you not do as far as making sure people are doing their lineups, doing waivers, things like that?
Yeah, the extent I do on that, I make sure people are doing their lineups every week. MFL has a nice feature now where they can remind people on Thursday morning. They also have a feature that sets their lineups if one's not set based on Fantasy Sharks every Thursday morning. I now use both of those, but I think the bigger ones that I use are, not allowing lineups to be set if there's an illegal lineup, stuff like that. It makes sure people get active and fix their team so that they know how to set their lineup. I think setting lineups in Dynasty is probably the least of the problems. I think the bigger activity issues come with not responding to trades or not making trade offers, not doing waivers. At least in my leagues, it feels like setting lineups is the least of the activity worries.
That's interesting. I feel like the commission duty that I have the most in season is when I'm looking at a lineup on Thursday at 4. I mean, on Sunday at 4 p.m. Like, well, this guy didn't submit his lineup this week.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and it's not something that happens every week, but I would say like 3 or 4 weeks a year, I look at and I find one person in my 5 or 6 leagues that didn't submit a lineup. So that's personally one of my problems. But I think one of the more sneaky problems is that it's tough to kind of, unless you're like checking every single team, it's hard to find out which teams are just not paying attention to the waiver wire. And there are, to an extent, like if you don't pay attention to the waiver, that's your own fault and your team's not going to be better because of it. But I am a proponent of, if you want your league to be successful, you need to have all of them, or if not almost all of them, being active on the waiver wire, active in the trade market. And you can have rules as far as trades like, oh, you must respond to trades within 7 days, right, or whatever it may be. But even if you have that rule in place, like how many people are going to commissioner like, hey, I sent Johnny a trade and he never responded.
Yeah, it's such an owner dependent thing. We've gone over this on Commission Impossible too, that it's so much more owner dependent, and you can try to force activity with different kinds of rules, but a lot of them really are hit and miss. I want to go back to the lineup thing for a second. Do you have people, just for setup sake, because this show talks about setups a lot, do you have people's lineups roll over each week, or do you have them cleared and they have to set a complete lineup each week?
I have them cleared because when you have them repeat, that's how bye weeks and injuries happen so quickly. Yep. Like when you have it roll over, people are like, oh, well, I'll just get last week's lineup. And that's how you have illegal lineups.
That was my question. I was going to say, if you clear it, it feels like you'd have a better success rate of people setting a lineup because then they have nothing in there. They can't just get lazy about it.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the more hot topics, I think you and Ryan McDowell and Commissioner Impossible have talked about this almost every episode. It's tanking.
Yeah.
Certainly it's one of the more common topics. And I have a very simple rule for tanking. It's called, if you see something, say something.
Yep.
If you see someone tanking, then let me know and I will handle it. I will talk to them and say, hey, why did this happen? Why did you start Tom Savage over Drew Brees? Like, that's the conversation that happens. And that kind of takes the onus off of me to where someone can come to me and it's like, hey, you haven't checked Larry's lineup for the last 3 weeks. And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't tell me 3 weeks ago that his lineup was bad. I know that you guys.
Do you have a deadline on it?
I mean, I would say like Tuesday. Like I need to know by Tuesday that there was an illegal lineup. But I mean, I don't think that's even in the rules. Like, because even if you told me on Friday that he had an illegal lineup the previous week, I'll still talk to the person. Yeah. But if you're like, yeah.
Here's what I'll just go over. I'll just say what my rule is on it in the leagues that, like, I run a commissioner service, safe league. So I have tanking rules in that. My personal leagues, I'm fine with tanking, as people probably know. But our rule is basically you're not allowed to submit a lineup with a player on bye, a player on injured, a player that's injured, or an obviously inferior player. That if you notice it, if you're in the league and you notice it, you have to let the commissioner know by end of day Monday, because that way we can get in and fix the lineup, and then before the Tuesday update, it's updated. So we do have that Monday night deadline.
Yeah, I don't traditionally, unless it's like something egregious, like someone only having 3 starting players, like I don't fix lineups. Like if someone has an illegal lineup for 1 week, it's like, okay, it happened. Like, I mean, what I'll traditionally do, if it's like an obviously like a bye week, like let's say if someone started a player on a bye week and they have a Monday night player, I will throw the Monday night player into their lineup, things like that. But if it's past, like there's not really a fair way to go about saying like, oh, I would have started this person, so they should go here. In the past tense. So traditionally, if it's a one-time thing, I'm not like going in and fixing it afterwards.
Okay, so here's where we land on that. Up until Monday night, Fantasy Sharks projections for the week before are still in place. Mm-hmm. And we very clearly state we will set your lineup based on Fantasy Sharks projections. Mm-hmm. If you're not changing it, in a way, I can see other owners complaining that you are letting them get away with tanking for a week, but I also see the other side of that it's a one-time accident, and that it depending on how tight your rules are on it. I can definitely see where you're coming from, that it's a hard thing to judge.
Yeah. So another thing is late lineups. I do sometimes have people come to me at 1:05 and saying, hey, I tried to submit my lineup, but it was 5 minutes too late. That one I am a little more lenient on, assuming the player didn't score a touchdown in the first minute. Right. Like I understand that sometimes you get in a little bit too late, and as long as you're doing something, not trying to get a clear advantage with when you're submitting a lineup at 1:05, you're not trying to get a clear advantage. You're just trying to get a lineup in. And so that's not hurting the league. That's not giving yourself an advantage. That's just trying to fix what you should have done 5 minutes earlier. Now, if every single week you're coming to me at 1:05 saying, I got my lineup at 1:05, you're like, okay, that's a problem. I'm not your lineup setter at 1:05. You should set your lineup anytime before 1 o'clock.
Yeah, and this is one of those that it might be depend on how friendly the league is, how, like, if it's commissioner service, you can't do that, obviously. But a personal league, you can definitely be that lenient. And if it's among friends, you probably should be that lenient. If it's a league among friends and they're not trying to get an advantage, the flip side is maybe the mistake looks like tanking. Like they leave an injured guy in and they're like 5 minutes in, oh, I left this guy. Yeah. So you in your normal personal leagues, I can see allowing for a little bit of leniency there. It also, I think the stakes might matter too. Some people in higher stakes might not allow like that.
But even in higher stakes, like they don't, I'm assuming most people don't want the quote unquote advantage of someone like screwing up their lineup, because that's not rewarding the best team. It's rewarding the best team that ended up facing the team that forgot their lineup.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, let's move on to waivers. I do think the in-season waivers are fairly similar to redraft waivers, but is there anything about your Dynasty waivers that differ from a traditional redraft waiver wire?
No, there really isn't. At least not the way I run redraft or Dynasty leagues. I run waivers in all my leagues. The Wednesday waivers, then after Wednesday waivers, it's first come, first serve up until each player's specific kickoff. I'm actually fine with, and I've seen a movement to this of multiple waiver runs per week, just for the people that are super busy and can't sit on the sit on the computer and get their get players as they're dropped or whatever, or as news happens. I'm fine with that too, but I far prefer first come first serve after that waiver run.
Yeah, I mean, as a commissioner, I willingly admit that first come first serve is not a fair way to do waivers.
Yeah,
I think it's the most convenient to do waivers. I don't think it's the most fair way.
Yeah,
and so I'm all about the convenience. I have my redraft league, coincidentally, does every afternoon from Wednesday to Sunday, they have waivers. So instead of doing first come first serve, it's just every day you'll be able to do waivers throughout the week, right. And that prevents someone from picking up a player that gets the news first. But the other thing, the problem from a commissioner perspective there is that when you have Thursday games, you can't pick up a player from Thursday from noon to kickoff. Yep. And that is a window of time where you traditionally are going to want to pick up a player, possibly.
Yep.
And not to mention, if we implement any like Saturday games or things like that, things get much more complicated when you don't do first come first serve waivers. But the complications do make it a little bit more fair. All right, let's move on to, we have payout / rolling pot. I do feel like rolling pots are a little bit more common in the Dynasty sphere. And this doesn't really have too much to do with in-season, but it can if you have, a weekly payout or things like that. So how do your Dynasty payouts kind of get impacted by in-season commission, if at all?
I don't know that it does at all. Like I don't feel like that the rolling pot. I have progressive pots in every league I'm in. Even my home keeper league that's 28 years old now has a progressive pot. And I don't think it affects it at all, really. That I can see if the pot gets big enough, someone, two people trying a little harder to, make some moves to make one person win and them sharing the pot. I think collusion might come into mindsets a little more with a bigger pot, but other than that, I don't know that I see it. I will say if it's a progressive pot for a reigning champion, the only thing I do see in season a whole lot more is that person trading like hell to win now. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, you can sometimes see other people trading to make another team good enough to avoid that pot being won. So I guess those are the couple things that you might see with those big pots.
Okay, yeah, and now I'm thinking about it, the one thing we closed out on the show last time was trade deadlines. So I think I know your personal opinion, but I guess we can talk about your personal opinion and then your commish service opinion. What are your thoughts on trade deadlines?
The commish service one is pretty easy. It's week 11. It's right in line with our redraft leagues too, and it makes it so it's really hard to collude at the end of the season. You're worried about in public leagues, random people, random friends teaming up to try to figure that out. In my personal leagues, I go right up until postseason starts. I used to be the no trade deadline guy. I was that guy for a good 5 or so years in the mid 2000s up until about 2007, 2009, something like that. And I saw so many people get even knowing the rule, get extremely upset. I saw teams ruined and abandoned. I saw playoffs completely rigged. I saw so much damage, and maybe it's better now, but I saw so many arms races destroy leagues that I decided, all right, it's like Major League Baseball. You're going to enter the playoffs with what you got, and that's what you got. And I haven't had a problem since. And so that's my personal opinion based on previous experience. But I always love to say, play what you enjoy. And if you are with 11 other guys that like no trade deadline at all, go for it. But mine shut off for the playoffs.
And I will wrap up with my favorite thing about a trade deadline is that it encourages owners to pay immediately after week 16, because the way my leagues function is that you get your trade rights turned off the kickoff of the playoffs, whether it's week 12, 13, 14, whatever it is for that specific league. Yep. And then I do the payouts, usually the Tuesday or Wednesday after week 16, depending on if it's Christmas or not. Usually don't do payouts on Christmas. But I will say that when you remove trade rights, and obviously I know you could theoretically remove trade rights after week 16, but it's obviously more convenient if they were already removed as it was. Yep. And then you say, hey, as soon as you send your payout or your buy-in, you get your trade rights back. And I think that is like 80% of the reason why in my leagues I have people paid for the following season by January 1st every single year is because they want their trade rights back.
You've touched on something that's really more like, I mean, I don't know if it's technically off season or in season, but it's such a huge thing that everybody listening to this show should really implement in their leagues is cutting off trade rights for the future year until the dues are paid. It's arguably one of the best rules I see out there in Dynasty. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Alrighty. Unless you have anything else, that should wrap us up. Any last words on in-season commissioning for Dynasty?
I don't think so. You're good at this.
There we go. It's like I've been doing it for a few years, and you've been doing it even longer. Thanks so much for bringing your wisdom to the show, Scott. We thank you so much for your time, and you are the man. Anything to plug before you head out?
I don't. Scottfish24 on Twitter. Follow me there, and if I plug anything there, that's where you'll find it, I guess. Keep listening and watching this Commissioner Chronicles. It's awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott, and we'll see you next time.